joins us for more on this development. Viv, we're just chatting before going on air. Thank you so much for joining us. You just said you were expecting it, not now, but you were expecting it. Just take us through that.
Well, basically, they were supposed to do it in a couple of months' time, have the review, but basically, we did expect them not to wait that long for the ratings agencies to start basically giving out reviews right now. Some of them are, one of the ratings is actually out this week, but S&P wasn't expected this soon. I did expect the downgrade. I didn't expect the downgrade and the negative outlook, which is a bit, the worst case scenario. They give an early downgrade, plus they give a negative outlook, being that they see a significant chance that the next time they look at South Africa, it may not be a probability, but they have a significant chance that they are going to downgrade us again. So there's obviously another big negative for the country going forward.
Now, where does this rating leave us as a country and for the layman in the street?
Well, you see, there's three big ones, there's Moody's, Fitch, and S&P. S&P is just one of them. If we get two of them saying basically we are junk status means that the chance of us repaying our debt is basically not a guarantee. It's not investment grade. So if investment grade status means you give them money, they'll probably give it to you back. There's a very high chance of them giving it to you back. Junk statement means there's a significant chance they won't give it to you back. If that's the case, then a lot of funds out there, global bond funds, operate according to certain rules. They're passive. They can't make choices. And one of the rules a lot of them have is that if two of the ratings agencies says you're junk, you can't invest in those funds because it's too high a risk for the profile of the investors that they have in their funds. So they basically will have to sell out. They'll be forced sellers effectively of South African bonds. And there's talks about the $500 million or so in terms of what could be the possible amount of forced selling that could be happening. So that is the danger that happens. It also means that less money can flow into the country because there's a source of lenders out there that we are basically excluded from. Okay.
Now, could this have been avoided?
Oh yeah, most certainly. I mean, if it wasn't for last week Thursday, this probably would have been avoided, at least now. Also, if our growth rate was a bit stronger, it could have been avoided as well. I mean, the long-term prospects for the country are, I think, quite positive. I mean, we have a great many advantages in our favor. Our infrastructure is very good. Our education system is incredible. And our talent is awesome. I mean, I was just doing a calculation the other day that you look at some of the South Africans out there in the world, people like, for instance, Elon Musk. Elon Musk, just one of the companies he's created is basically as big as Ford Motor Company. Think about it. A South African created a bunch of companies out there. Just one of them is as big as Ford, right? From South Africa. Of course, probably wouldn't have been as successful in South Africa as he has been overseas, but still, the talent is in the country. We have a lot of people like this that do great things overseas. And the unfortunate thing is that we don't provide enough of a fertile ground in South Africa that more people don't, or the really super talented people don't think of staying in South Africa, but think instead of finding other avenues in the world to go and basically use their talents.
Just speaking of that, Viv, how do we get that talent and those business-minded people who are able to make a lot of money and who are able to establish big businesses outside the country? How do we bring them back into the country and ensure that they invest in their own countries?
I mean, of course, there should be some kind of outreach, etc. But I think the case of the matter is that we're just not one person. We have a stream of these people.
Of course.
And I mean, I just saw a survey a couple of years ago about the 5 or 6 best regarded executives in Silicon Valley. More than half of them were South African. It's an incredible amount of people from South Africa that go overseas and are not just succeeding, but our rock stars are very, very famous and very successful. We have the talent. We have a pool of talent because our education system is still very good. At least at certain levels are very good, and the tertiary education as well. A South African graduate is usually considered to be a very good graduate overseas. Those are things that I think means that we still have a lot of potential. Our infrastructure is great. Our financial sector is very good. So those factors are obviously things we can focus on. All we need to do now is basically make it more attractive for them to stay locally, perhaps reduce some of the barriers to growth that we see in the country, make things run more efficiently, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be doing 5 or 6% growth rates like we should be doing according to our potential.
Now, you mentioned earlier the fact that Moody's, if anything, Moody's is giving a rating expected on Friday. If it doesn't go our way in a positive way, can it really be worse than it already is?
Oh yeah, most certainly. Because like I said, if we have 2 of them giving us a junk status, then we will see a case of there'd be some forced selling happening out there, and that forced selling would basically be fighting against the currency as it is, making it weaker. It would also basically, like I said, reduce the overall it's not just affecting the country as well. It affects any part of the country. For instance, the financial sector. When the sovereign rating is downgraded, the banks, by definition, because they're in the sovereign, they're in the country, also get downgraded. So our banks, for instance, become find it harder to find money. And when they find it harder to find money, it's more expensive for them. It's more expensive for them to find it, and more expensive for them to lend it out as well.
So it means interest rates high.
Exactly, and more difficulty out there. The currency weakens like it has. I mean, the rand went from basically last week Monday from 12.30 some change to now 13.70. That move of around 40 means that every single thing you buy in dollar terms is suddenly 10% plus more expensive. and we buy a lot of stuff from overseas, oil, capital goods, etc. The country becomes much more difficult to run.
Now, with just looking at the weakening of the rand in a very short space of time, bonds also weaken sharply. Is there a way of working around that and ensuring that it's reversible in the near future, in the short term?
Look, I mean, the rand might feel some support. I do suspect that there's probably some central bank, the Reserve Bank is probably intervening to a certain extent to reduce some of the very negative effects. Because last time this happened with Benegate, the blowout was very quick and very strong. This time around, it's been obviously the rand wants to get weaker. You can see that in the day, but there's usually it seems to be like start of the day it's quite weak, and then the end of the day it gets a little bit stronger. Maybe to basically manipulate the closing prices or something. Who knows? We can reverse some of the factors here, but I think we should look at the range of possibilities for us. We could either be Korea or we could be Colombia. Korea basically took about a year to recover. Colombia took much longer. Talk about over a decade or so. So when you go to junk status, it could take you anywhere between a year and a decade to recover into that kind of thing. Or even sometimes some countries have not recovered in over a decade. If we're Korea, if we basically are able to do what Korea did in the East Asian crisis and so on, and come back from this kind of downgrade in a year, it would involve a lot of basically cooperation from government, from civil society, from business. I remember when looking at the Korean crisis, the East Asian crisis, you saw individual citizens actually going and depositing gold with the banks to actually boost the reserves of the country, and that's the kind of zeitgeist we need in the country. That's the kind of togetherness we need. If everyone pulls together, we can recover from this in a matter of a year or so. If, however, this continues to be a case where our growth rates are weak, where disunity in the economy and in the government as well, we could see this lasting well over a decade.
Just speaking of disunity in the government, is this decision by Standard & Poor's based squarely on the political upheaval that we're seeing in the country, especially last week Thursday, the reshuffle?
Almost certainly. I mean, they brought it, look at it, they were going to do it in a couple of months' time, the next review, not even downgrade, just the next review. Then a week after, not even a week after, basically 3 days after we've had this capital reshuffle, they bring it forward and they do a downgrade and they do a negative outlook as well, which is a double whammy. And that, I think, is a very clear indication this is about the political machinations behind the scene. And it has more to do exactly, not just with the perception, but the reality as well. For instance, some of the fears out there around the nuclear deal. The nuclear deal is incredibly expensive. It's R1 trillion or so, according to some estimates, which would basically add another 50% onto our national debt. It would be more than 20,000 rands per every man, woman and child in this country in more debt, which, as you think about it, South Africa is not a rich country. 20,000 rands per person is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Now, just speaking of that, the new finance minister, he's come out and spoken of radical economic change. What direction would this be?
Well, the question arises not so much radical economic change. I think the world kind of is used to the BE situation, and they kind of understand that this is the thing in the country. It's been this case for 20 years. And if it was a little bit more extreme in terms of it, maybe. I think some of the stuff around once empowered, always empowered is an issue, because if a company basically has to re-empower every 10 to 15 years or whatever it may be in terms of ownership, it's going to be another effective tax on the country, on the other company in terms of its operations, maybe a couple % a year. So that's acceptable. I think the real fear at the moment is not so much the radical economic transformation is going to occur, it's whether or not it's actually the real thing. Is it something that's happening in order to hide some maneuvers behind the scenes? The real fear, I do think, in the perception in the market anyway, is that radical economic transformation is not so much a policy, but it's a blanket to cover some other things that are happening behind the scenes. Some moves by the administration to basically give tenders or give funds to certain groups that support them, etc. We all know what the situation with that is, and that, I think, is the real fear, is that there's not just a change in policy, but there's a change in ethics and a change in the safeguards against corruption.
Now, speaking of corruption, as it were, the new finance minister, what can he do with his team to ensure stability in the country and a turnaround? And maybe there's a huge change in terms of the ratings agencies. As you mentioned, in another few months we will be looking at another rating. Then for that to apart from the ones that's expected on Friday, in a few months it might be the same as Standard & Poor's. It might not be, but just to turn around that and ensure that the stability in the country and the outlook, as it were, from the global economy.
It might have taken 3 days to get the downgrade. It'll take many more days to get an upgrade effectively. And so to turn it around, effectively he would have to demonstrate a level of integrity, that I don't know that it would be quite difficult to demonstrate without actually going against the person that appointed him, which is the president. So you'd have to almost be a rebellious kind of a minister, basically shutting down some of the president's, proposals, going against the president quite strongly in terms of spending plans, etc. That would prove his integrity, and that would change some of the opinions. But if he does that, he probably wouldn't keep the job for very long.
Viv, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there for
Thanks
now. That was Viv Govender from Rand Swiss joining us there as we look at, as we got a downgrade today from Standard & Poor's. Now,